Is Halloween pagan? Yeah, what's going on, party people in the place to be? I go by the name of the BK Apologist, transmitting all the way live. New York is the city, Brooklyn is the borough. What's good? What's popping? Hope everybody's having a good midweek. We're almost done with this one, and yeah, and of course, we are at that time of the year again where we get to see all the you know, Halloween is pagan memes and videos. And shout out to the whole Bodega crew. We did a whole special about this, I think last year, so that was definitely fun. Of course, I gotta say what's up to the party people in the chat. We got Richly Redeemed, we got New Reformation in the building, we got David Payne, Tyler Lott, LJ Jackson, the incredible, the incomparable, the indelible Nate 2D2. We got Real American Mr. Phil Fox on the check-in. Oh man. Oh, good, Nate. I'm glad you got it. I'm glad you got it. Um, and of course, if you like what's happening right now, please share what you like right now with others. And if you like to contribute to the BK Apologist, you can support me via PayPal. And if you like to be a monthly supporter of BK, you can become a Patreon where you get an assortment of goodies to enhance your personal Bible study. So yeah, we got Chris is in the building. What's up? What's up? So yeah, so this is the time of year where we hear a lot about, a particular holiday being pagan. And you know, it wasn't that long ago where I was one of those people. I think a lot of believers, we mean well. We want to be pious and righteous and holy. We don't want to be in any contact with anything that might taint our witness. And amen to that. Right? That's a good attitude to have. But I was one of those Christians that, Christian Christmas was pagan, Halloween was pagan, Easter was pagan, and I stood strong in that, but I kept reading. I love to read, I love to research, and as I started digging more and more, I started realizing, you know what, I'm wrong about these things. So I had a pivot on this, and I just felt like I wanted to share some things that I've seen, so that is not a stumbling block between believers. Because some of us, are not really into the holidays, and some of us are. And it's important that we don't look down on the other believer because they do or do not celebrate a particular holiday. You know what I mean? So, with that being said, share my screen. And of course, we're going to go down memory lane, because a lot of us, we felt a certain way about Halloween because of certain tracks that were given. And some of us remember, the chick tracks, you find in the street or in the mall. So here's one about Halloween. So let's look at this real quick. Right? Satan is alive and well and is busy destroying mankind. He and his demons know their time is short. They're afraid of Jesus Christ because he created a lake of fire for them. But Satan wants everybody to fry in hell with him. Unfortunately, he'll get most of them. He's a master deceiver, and Halloween is just one of his tricks. Ooh. Kids love Halloween because it's both fun and scary, but they have no idea what's behind this celebration. To Satanists and witches, Halloween is no joke. It's their most solemn ceremony of the year. As we get closer to the second coming of Jesus, Satanism will increase, so will human sacrifice. Halloween started in the British Isles with the Druids. Those guys were really spooky. October 31st was a night of terror called Samhain. That night, the Druids went house to house, taking victims for human sacrifice. In exchange for the victim, they left a jack o' lantern, which was supposed to protect the home from death demons that night. Satan loves Halloween because it glamorizes the power of darkness, drawing little kids into his camp, and it's paying off. Witchcraft is exploding among teens today. The Lord hates Halloween and its origin. Satanic human sacrifices are a slap in God's face, right? So, you know, it's we a lot of us believe this. We see a lot of people teaching this now. We see a lot of memes and videos, right? And so we're gonna look at history and see if any of these points are correct. All right. So, uh, in Christianity.com, the Christian festival of All Saints Day comes from a conviction that there is a spiritual connection between those in heaven and on earth. In Catholic tradition, the holiday honors all those who have passed on to the kingdom of heaven. It is a national holiday in numerous historically Catholic countries. In Methodist tradition, All Saints Day relates to giving God earnest gratitude for the lives and deaths of his saints, remembering those who are well known and not. Additionally, individuals throughout Christian history are celebrated, such as Peter the Apostle and Charles Wesley, as well as people who have personally guided one to faith in Jesus, such as one's relative or friend. All right, so this is from Christianity.com. Real simple summary of what the day actually is. All right, let's continue. The name Halloween or Halloween is a traditional contracted form of All Hallows Eve. This in turn is a reference to the feast of All Saints Day, traditionally called All Hallows Day or simply All Hallows, or sometimes Hallow Mass. In English, in the Catholic liturgical year, All Saints Day falls on November 1st each year, and as first rank feast day was always celebrated with a Virgil and later with an octave. This is coming from a website called History for Atheists. This is a atheist website. All right, so he has no horse in the race. This is an atheist website. Let's continue. This means that it was not only celebrated on the day itself, but also like Easter Sunday and Christmas Day, with preparatory prayers and a mass the night before, the octave, an extended 8-day sequence of liturgy following the feast day, was added by Pope Sextus in 1480. Though it was removed in the 20th century, the Virgil held the evening before, however, seems as old as the feast itself. So Halloween refers to this Virgil and its associated traditions. The origin of Halloween from the Catholic tradition is taking time out to celebrate and to remember believers who have passed on. That's the actual origin. That's it. It really is, right? So that's that. We can end the video here. This is what the origin is, but we gotta continue. Okay. What is obviously missing from all this is any hint of an influence by anything pagan, let alone some Irish or Celtic festival presided over by Druids. Even if the dedication of the chapel in St. Peter's by Gregory III was not the origin of November 1st date, and practice arose independently in England and spread to Francia via the influence of English scholars like Akin, there is a serious problem with the idea that this was due to Irish Celtic influence in England. This is because the earliest Irish reference to an All Saints Day does not have it celebrated there on November 1st, but on April 20th. So you can't even link it up, even if that was the case, because it's two different days, right? April and November. I mean, that's a nice distance, right? So let's continue. So let's see this connection to this druid thing, right? Let's look at that. And we're going to look at this book called Trick or Treat: A History of Halloween by Lisa Morton. She says here, in 1762, British military engineer Charles Valency was sent to Ireland on a surveying mission. Valency, however, was no ordinary engineer. He was extraordinarily well read in history and linguistics, corresponded with many of the leading proponents of the then fashionable Orientalism, and fancied himself a scholar and writer. Right? Hold on for a minute. Hold on. Okay. So he soon developed an obsession with the lore and language of Ireland's ancient Celts. And he wrote hundreds of pages of collected fact, observation, and speculation on the Green Isles' early inhabitants. There was just one problem. Much of what Valenti recorded was wrong. By 1786, when Valenti published the third volume of his opus Collectanea de Rubis Hibernicis, it was already well established that the name Samhain referred to the 3-day Celtic New Year celebration that began when the sun went down on 31st of October. Other linguists have recorded the translation of summer end for Samhain, right? But Valanche believed that there was a false derivation and went on to state that Samhain was actually a Celtic deity who was also known as Balsab, or Baal is Lord and Sab death. It didn't seem to matter much that the name Balsab appears nowhere else in Celtic lore, or even that Valenti's work was dismissed during his lifetime. The Orientalist scholar Sir William Jones said of Valente, quote, "Do you wish to laugh? Skim the book over. Do you wish to sleep? Read it regularly." So this idea of Samhain being this demonic festival came from this particular person named Valenci, and he's completely wrong. Completely wrong. And he was debunked during his time. So during the 18th century, he was debunked. But let's continue. Somehow, Valence's work found its way into library shelves all over Britain and formed a strange alternate history of Samhain and its decadent Halloween that ran alongside the traditional Celtic folklore texts and Irish dictionaries that define the word correctly. Nearly 2 centuries after Valence's first journey into Ireland, books like Halloween through 20 Centuries were still referring to Samhain, Lord of the Dead. By the early 1990s, Christian groups throughout America were urging parents to keep their children from celebrating a holiday during which human beings were burned as an offering in order to appease and cajole Samhain, Lord of the Death. Samhain wasn't even a deity, guys. It's the month. It's a month, right? It's a month. And yes, to LA, no one's saying that you have to follow the festival at all. If you don't like it, I don't celebrate it. What I'm trying to share is that it has no pagan origins. And more importantly, when our brothers and sisters do partake in it, the intent isn't to celebrate another deity. That's all I'm saying. I don't celebrate it. If you don't celebrate it, cool. It's just we gotta make sure that when our brothers and sisters, dress their kids up like Captain America or Strawberry Shortcake, that we're not condemning them. You know what I mean? So let us continue. Shamwing was also an important day for administration. akin to U.S. Tax Day in modern times. A yearly gathering was held at Tara, the ancient seat of kings, where 3 days' worth of feasting and sporting alternated with debt repayment and trials. Those who were found guilty of particular severe crimes were executed then as well. Before the eve of Shamwin, all home hearth fires were extinguished, and the Druids used needle fire or fire created by friction to construct a bonfire on the nearby hill of Tel- Teltaka, embers from which the fire was distributed to each household, and a tax was exacted for this service. So Shamwin was a time when you paid your taxes, or whatever legal situation you had got tied up and resolved at this time. And these evil druids made sure that everybody had lights in their homes. That's what happened during this time. All right, that's what actually happened. It was tax day. It's get your affairs in orders day. Right? There was no Baal deity named Shawan. No, it was tax day. The idea that the world of the city, the fairy folk of Irish legend, is open to the mundane world at certain times of the year is also found associated with Beltane. But even here, we do not find any indication of ritual or religious observance. Perhaps the closest we get to that is in the how you say this Shankas, the lore of places, also from the 12th century. So this is not even ancient stuff, guys. Which tells the story of Saint Patrick throwing down an idol of the pagan god Crom Cruach at Meg Slit, the plain of prostration. It says, quote, the firstlings of every issue and the chief scions of every clan would sacrifice to this idol. It also details how each year at Shamwon, the High King would lead the people in prostrating themselves before the idol of Crum, and how they would fling themselves on the ground so violently that three-quarters of them died each time. Other later versions of how Patrick ended the worship of this god also mention sacrifices of children to this idol, but makes no mention of Shamwin. Hudson is skeptical of whether these stories reflect anything historical and concludes that the Magslit story sounds like a medieval Christian fantasy, developing over time and growing more lurid with each retelling. It should be noted here that even in these stories, the references to child sacrifice to this idol are not associated with Shamwin. There's no connection here. There's literally no connection whatsoever, right? So this guy's funny. Halloween is pagan because it promotes tooth decay. Rearrange the words in tooth decay, and you get Dagon the fish god the boy. That was great. That was great. That was great. Wow. All right, now the phrase "trick or treat," right? That definitely has some pagan connotations, right? The earliest recorded usage of the actual phrase "trick or treat" in connection with Halloween comes from Alberta, Canada, where in 1927 a newspaper article reported on pranksters demanding trick or treat at houses, although no mention of costuming is made. This is not some ancient custom. 1927 in Canada. It wasn't in the deep woods of ancient Germany and Ireland with the Druids and no, Canada, 1927. All right, earliest recorded usage of trick or treat. Kids just getting into mischief. By the 1930s, the phrase in connection with Halloween and costume children seemed to be working its way down through northern USA, as states like Oregon reported that young goblins and ghosts employing modern shakedown methods successfully worked the quote trick or treat system. One of the first national mentions of trick or treat appears in the article of 1939 entitled A Victim of the Window Soaping Brigade, which both refers to trick or treat as the age old Halloween salutation and makes it plain that the practice was a method of subverting rowdy pranking. Still, it wasn't until after the Second World War, when rationing was over and luxuries like candy were once again readily available, finally spread throughout the entire USA. You know what I mean? Trick or treating is not some ancient pagan 1920s Canada. Kids being kids, trying to shake down adults for a candy. You know, nothing with Shamwin, nothing about druids. Okay, all right. The jack o' lantern. This got to be pagan, right? That's what the chick track said, right? All right. Well, let's look. Starting in the 1800s, Benetton says countries in Northern Europe developed their own customs of carving faces into vegetables in the fall season. In Ireland and Scotland, for example, people would carve faces into turnips, and beets were used in other places as well. Through 19th century, immigrants very well could have brought their vegetable carving traditions to the US. Benetton says that it was actually something else that really popularized the carrying of the pumpkin, its potential as a prank. Before Halloween was widely celebrated in the United States, kids started taking pumpkins, which were overwhelmingly plentiful during the month of September and October, and carving faces into them. After sticking a candle to the pumpkin to light it up, kids would run around, Benedict tells Time, frightening people with the spooky looking objects. The so called carved pumpkin trick became so popular that there were even how to articles printed in magazines as early as 1842. So, this is something that comes from the old country where people during, harvest time would make these little faces and vegetables, not just pumpkins. But in America, pumpkins were more accessible, and the kids, being kids, having a good time, were making these faces on pumpkins. And this is before Halloween was even celebrated in the U.S. This was taking place. Again, no pagan connection, and NATO is good. So no, it's not a modern Canadian pagan practice. Funny guy. All right, let's keep going. So where did the name Jack come from? There are a few steps in this story, and the etymology of Jack o' lantern is almost unrelated to its modern meaning and tradition. According to one prominent theory, the quote Jack in question is the subject of an old folk tale. The story, which was several different iterations, can be traced back to as long as 1551. Benetton says, and is quite sinister indeed, often called Stingy Jack. He spends much of his life tricking the devil. I'm going to say that again. He spends much of his life tricking the devil. In many versions of the story, the frustrates the devil so much that upon his death, he is locked out from the gates of hell. The devil leaves Jack with nothing other than a burning piece of coal, and Jack wanders aimlessly for the rest of eternity, just as a ghost with his floating lights. Jack of the Lantern, according to that version of the history, became Jack o' Lantern. Based on Jack's tale, there remains a bit of irony in this pumpkin's symbolic ability for bringing people together, and the pumpkin itself was a rather sinister vegetable historically. Benetton writes, in fact, European art from the 16th century used the pumpkin as a symbol for North American untamed wilderness, as she explains. But still, the story of Jack and his lantern has nothing to do with a pumpkin. So we see two things happening. We see this story of Jack who tricks Satan. So it's like, oh, we're worshiping Satan. Well, Jack wasn't worshiping. He was beating Satan in the head to the point where Satan didn't want no parts of him. And then you combine that with the reason why they carved pumpkins in Europe was to make fun of Americans. There's nothing really spiritual happening here. Well, unless Jack, defeating the devil, right? So again, where is this? Where's the Shaman? Where's the Druids? Where right? Oh, they would leave a jack o' lantern. No, the jack o' lantern became a thing in America. It wasn't a thing in Ireland, and it was based off a story of a guy who was actually tricking Satan. All right. It was only after 19th century Americans saw the connection between the legend and the spookily lit up carved pumpkins they were creating that the two came to be seen as connected. By the early 20th century, carved pumpkins had adopted the name we now use. So this is where we get the jack o' lantern. It's based on the story of a man who was able to trick Satan and frustrate him, and a combination of that and European immigrants' way of making fun of Americans. That's the origin of the jack o' lantern. Right? So let's see here. So and I've shared this a bunch of times. It's really about intent, right? This is from a interview that Heiser did. He's talking about this gentleman named Jordan Paper who wrote this book, The Deities Are Many, a Polytheistic Theology. And this is what he says. I had read Paper's book on polytheism called The Gods of Many. Jordan Paper is a practicing polytheist. He's retired now from teaching, but I still see him from time to time at SBL meetings. I know what he looks like. He's a practicing polytheist, and he was very transparent about his quote unquote faith. This is a scholarly meeting. He's not holding anything back here. He says basically, this only works if you solicit this kind of contact. It doesn't just happen. You have to want it and you have to do things to solicit it. And the powers, he used these terms, the powers, the gods, the spirits will respond if you are open to their contact, to what they can do for you. All right. This is the issue with all these holidays. You know what I mean? It's like, hold on for a minute. Let me see here. No, it's not good. All right, cool. So it's intent. Intent. You can't trip and fall. Oops, I'm a Satanist. That's not how it works, right? And you know what's funny? The witches and the sorcerers and the pagans, they should be mad too, because they got lied to. Because they think this is the pagan holiday too. They got lied to. Has nothing to do with any kind of, the veil of the other realm being the shortest time, and it has nothing to do with that. And with Shawan, Shawan was when you paid your taxes. So the pagans got played too, right? But again, it's always about intent. What are you doing on Halloween? You can't just trip and fall into paganism. You have to solicit and invite these pagan gods into your life. That's how it works. So, a question to ask: are Christians actively soliciting contact with other gods during Halloween? Not that I'm a betting man, but if I was, I would bet that no. Christians are not soliciting contact with other gods. They're not. Because the issue that a lot of us have as believers is that we have a cheap sense of worship. What do I mean by that? Well, if all it takes for me to worship a pagan deity is to have a pumpkin, then all it takes for me to be a Christian is to wear a Jesus piece. And of course, nobody would agree with that. Like, no, it's the intent, right? It's the intent. What are you doing? What kind of relationship do you have? Have you invited this deity into your life? You know what I mean? So we have to be consider that we want to make sure that our worship isn't cheap. That all it takes is for you to wear a chain or have a pumpkin or a Christmas tree, and therefore somehow you're a pagan. No, that's not how it works in the pagan world, and that's not how it works in our world, right? You can show up to church all you want. You can say all the hallelujah, know all the catchphrases in the church. Doesn't make you a Christian, does it? No. So, and that's what I wanted to share. So again, when people come to you with Halloween's pagan, please share this video. Please share these sources. It has nothing to do with Shamwin. Jack O' Lantern has nothing to do. In fact, it's actually kind of a cool story that this guy was actually able to best Satan. That's kind of cool to me. You know what I mean? So, but yeah. So again, if you do participate, amen. Have fun with the kiddies. Just stay away from the 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 sugar wax, aka candy corn. I'm just playing, kind of. But for those of us who still feel a way about the day, don't celebrate it. It's okay. Let's just not look down on others that do. Because again, intent, you know? And right, well said here. There's an argument that one should avoid Halloween because of the associations with ungodliness. But as demonstrated here, there is no argument for pagan roots. It's a question of conscience. Yeah, absolutely. But even if it had pagan roots, all right, let's say that. You mean to tell me that I can't use a pumpkin because the pagans use it? A food that God Yahweh made all of a sudden is off limits to the followers of Yahweh because a pagan uses it? That's giving power over to the pagans. Same thing with the tree. So they can have a tree, but we can't. But it's our God that made the tree in the first place. Yeah. So something to keep in mind. Oh my gosh, Nate. It's kind of difficult not to look down on some of those who celebrate Halloween because a lot of them are kids and I'm a very tall adult. I'm sure you can fight the temptation, sir. I'm sure you can fight it. So, with that being said, people, Halloween isn't pagan at all. Enjoy it or don't enjoy it. It's up to you. All right. So, with that, we are out. Peace.